National parks hold something for everyone, whether it's beautiful views, hiking, new discoveries, or adventure. National parks have it all, but most importantly, national parks have been inspiring conservation since the creation of the first national park in 1872. None of this could have been possible without one man, John Muir. Referred to by many as the father of the American conservation movement, Muir's contributions to the environmental movement in the form of the Sierra Club, the creation of Yosemite Park, and his many literary works, and his influences on others have been invaluable. But how did he achieve this great legacy?
The world will look back to this time we live in and remember the voice of one crying in the wilderness and bless the name of John Muir. He sung the glory of nature like another psalmist, and as a true artist was unashamed of his emotions. His countrymen owe him gratitude as the pioneer of our system of national parks. Muir's writing and enthusiasm were the chief forces that inspired the movement.
John Muir was born on April 21st in 1838 in Dunbar, Scotland. In 1849, his family moved to a small farm in Fountain Lake, Wisconsin. Muir had always been a lover of the outdoors, but in 1867, while working in a carriage part factory, a screwdriver drove into his eye, and after a month of being completely blind, Muir's eyes miraculously healed, and he vowed to spend the rest of his life outdoors.
I am losing precious days. I am degenerating into a machine for making money. I am learning nothing in this trivial world of men. I must break away and get into the mountains to learn the news.
So, in April of 1868, Muir traveled to California's Yosemite Valley and promptly fell in love with the area. Muir began to explore, writing down his experiences in his journal along the way. An excerpt from one of his journals reads,
As long as I live, I'll hear waterfalls and birds and wind sing. I'll interpret the rocks, learn the language of flood, storm, and avalanche. I'll acquaint myself with the glaciers and walled gardens, and get as near the heart of the world as I can.
One of the first great milestones in Muir's life and career was in 1871 with the publishing of his first work, Yosemite Glaciers, which marked the start of his writing career and his impact on conservation through his influence on people. The first notable person Muir influenced was William Keith, a painter inspired by Muir's writing. Keith and Muir met up, and the two became close friends. Keith was the first person that Muir brought to Yosemite, and on this trip, Keith was in awe of the High Sierras. When he returned, he drew inspiration from the mountain and painted what has been described as epic paintings of the High Sierras. Through his art, Keith spread the beauty of Yosemite, inspired people to go out into the wild, hence starting Muir's chain reaction of conservation. Muir was becoming more and more of an influential writer. He began to campaign further for government protection of forests, and in 1876, his first hugely successful article was published in the Sacramento Record Union, God's First Temples, How Shall We Preserve Our Forests? In Muir's campaign for conservation and forest protection, another tremendous step in Muir's path was when he met Robert Underwood Johnson, the editor-in-chief of Century magazine, and the two went camping in Yosemite. Muir showed Johnson the destruction from the logging and the agriculture.
Muir estimated that the grass and the seeding trees of 9/10 of the Sierra had been eaten down so close as to make a whole range look like dusty coral. He saw trees being cut everywhere in a wholesale fashion. The forests were being destroyed.
Johnson was taken aback by all of the carnage that he had seen, and together Muir and Johnson decided to campaign to make Yosemite an official park. Muir wrote many articles for Johnson's magazine and newspapers that whipped up sentiment for conservation. Here's an excerpt from one of Muir's major articles called The Treasures of Yosemite.
Any fool can destroy trees. They cannot run away, and if they could, they would still be destroyed, chased, and hunted down as long as fun or a dollar could be got out of their bark hides, branching horns, or magnificent bull backbones. Through all the wonderful, eventful centuries since Christ's time, and long before that, God has cared for these trees. But he cannot save them. Some fools only Uncle Sam can do that.
And on October 1st, in 1890, Muir and Johnson were victorious. President Harrison signed the Yosemite Plan bill and made Yosemite an official national park. All of this became possible through Muir's influential writings, but the establishment of Yosemite was just another step in Muir's tremendous journey. Another branch in Muir's quest for conservation was in 1892, when John Muir and friends formed the Sierra Club, which has the slogan, "Make the Mountains Glad." The Sierra Club is debatably one of Muir's greatest accomplishments, from 1892 to today and forever into the future. The Sierra Club's responsibility was campaigning to set aside land in order to create national parks, and by 1893 the federal government had set aside 13 million acres of forest reserve. These 13 million acres all stemmed from the Sierra Club's environmental activists. Because of Muir's influence, the Sierra Club has gone on to create the Sequoia National Park, Washington's own Mount Rainier National Park, the Petrified Forest National Park, and the Grand Canyon National Park. But what really is the reason that Muir has gone down as the greatest environmentalist in history? A massive reason that Muir's legacy lives on today is because of the influence he had on others, specifically and most notably Theodore Roosevelt and Ansel Adams. Theodore Roosevelt has been called the conservation president, but who started him on this path? It was John Muir. In 1903, Roosevelt spent 3 days camping with Muir in the High Sierras. On these 3 days, Muir had a mission: to convince Roosevelt to do some forest good in talking freely around the campfire, by not only putting work into the conservation message, but Muir also requested that Yosemite Valley and Mariposa's Grove be put under federal protection and added to the Yosemite National Park. Roosevelt finally agreed to the Yosemite Recession Bill in June 1906, putting both Yosemite Valley and Mariposa Grove under federal protection. After his camping experience with Muir, Roosevelt wrote In Yosemite with John Muir and dedicated himself and his presidency to the conservation movement.
There can be nothing in the world more beautiful than the Yosemite, the groves of the great sequoias. Our people should see to it that they are preserved for their children and their children's children forever, with their majestic beauty unmarred.
Roosevelt played the role of conservation president well. By the end of his presidency, Roosevelt had created 5 national parks, 18 national monuments, 55 national bird sanctuaries and wildlife regions, and 150 forests. Thus, it was John Muir who was responsible. By inspiring Roosevelt through the beauty of nature and his passion, Muir created a chain reaction of conservation. Roosevelt went on to create the United States Forest Service and signed the 1906 Antiquities Act, responsible for creating 5 national parks. And the United States Forest Service has been teaching Muir's message to future generations and inspiring conservation through their many programs. An example of one today is Youth in Yosemite, where youth of all ages are able to contribute to nature and the preservation of national parks, inspiring people like this 2013 California conservation participant, age 23, who after participating in the program said,
I feel a deeper connection to and appreciation for nature. I feel more confident living outdoors and more passionate about conservation.
Another person who passed down Muir's legacy was Ansel Adams, a nature photographer and conservationalist who published his first work in 1939 called Sierra Nevada, the John Muir Trail. Adams looked to Muir's writing and publications for inspiration and traveled to Yosemite, and, just like Muir, was immediately in love. Adams began to photograph the beauty of Yosemite in hopes of showing people all of its glory and raising awareness for the wilderness. He then joined Muir's Sierra Club, and his first photos were published in the Sierra Club Bulletin. Through his photography, Adams was able to capture the beauty of the parks in a way that no one had before, once again inspiring people to go into nature. Over the course of the 20th century, no artist had a greater role in the awakening of environmental awareness than Ansel Adams. His legacy is more than a body of beautiful images. Adams changed how we think and how we act. Across the arc of his life, one thing remained constant: to express through his art the forms and moods and the ancient forces of our small planet, our only home in a vast universe. Jonathan Spaulding. John Muir inspired an activism chain reaction. People inspired by Muir went on to inspire others, starting Muir's conservation chain reaction through the creation of the Sierra Club, Muir's work with Roosevelt, and his influence on Ansel Adams, and much more. Muir was able to create a legacy that will live on indefinitely. Muir's legacy continues to live on through the many, many monuments, such as 54 years after his death on December 24th, 1914, Muir was awarded the Conservation Service Award, the Interior Department's highest civilian honor, and in 1980, Muir was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
If you think about all the gains our society has made from independence to now, it was not government. It was activism.
People think, oh, Teddy Roosevelt established Yosemite National Park. What a great president. BS! It was John Muir. It was who invited Roosevelt out and then convinced him to ditch his security and go camping. It was Muir, an activist, a single person!